Hello friends, my name is Marinés, and today I want to talk to you about rereading. If you are at all familiar with my content and my channel, you're probably thinking to yourself, Marinés, when aren't you talking about rereading? And that is a fair point. I am a big rereader. I feel like in the general scale of booktube, I'm probably in the higher end of rereading, of people who reread the most. I know there are people who don't reread at all or only reread one or two books a year. I reread so much. Whenever I do talk about rereading, I tend to get comments about it from people who wish they reread more, or people who do reread, who find it refreshing to hear from somebody else who rereads, a whole gamut of things. So I thought it would be fun to sit down today and just do a chatty video about how and why I reread. As best as I can organize my thoughts, there are two things at play here. And one is a personality thing. I think in a lot of ways I am built to be a reconsumer of media, and on the other hand, it is a decision and conscious thing where I choose to reread for a number of reasons that all revolve around the fact that rereading really plays into or informs the kind of reader that I want to be. And then there's a lot of overlap. So the first point probably is a place of overlap where it is part of my personality and also part of how I am choosing to reread. But one of the comments that I get the most when I'm talking about rereading is about time and how people want to reread or they're interested in rereading, but they don't have enough time to because there are so many other books out there, so many new books that they are interested in. I think something to keep in mind here is that a lot of times we use the language of not having enough time when we're really talking about prioritizing. We all obviously have some time for reading, but the way that you prioritize or the types of book that you prioritize, that's up to you and it's different for everyone. I prioritize rereading to a certain extent for the reasons that we will discuss here, but also on the personality front, I find that I don't tend to think about reading and books in terms of so many books, so little time. Not that I've never had that thought, especially when it comes to my personal TBR and not the entire concept of all of the books that have ever been written. I tend not to think about that in any sort of way that makes me feel pressure about reading a certain kind or number or type of book. Yeah, there are a lot of books out there. It is what it is. I tend not to think about that. Those thoughts tend to be a little closer in scale, which I know you guys just watched me go through a whole freak out about my unhaul and TBR. And so the idea of okay, I have all of these books, I'm not going to read them all. And it was less a freak out about the fact that I wouldn't be able to read them all, but about deciding which ones I would and would not read. This came up recently too when I went on a little spree on my channel about talking about how I rate and review books, reading critically versus reading for enjoyment, and then a little before that, hate reading or reading books that I suspect I'm not going to like. Some of the responses that I got from those videos also involved time and this idea of I want to read things that I'm enjoying. I don't have time to read bad books, or I don't want to waste time on bad books, which is totally valid, but it's also not how I think about it. I don't feel like I'm wasting time when I'm reading. Sure, there are books that upset me, there are books that I wish I hadn't read or things of that nature, but I never really think I wasted reading time on this book because I get so much else out of reading, and especially out of making content after I've read, of reviewing. All of that is valuable to me, and so I don't feel well, now I've wasted time because reading is reading and I've done that thing. So time rereading is not time wasted for me, and I don't have this pressure of well, there are other books out there. I'm reading, and I'm reading a book. So rereading is something that is perfectly okay in the grand scheme of my reading. I count all my rereads towards my reading goal. Each time that I read a book, whether I've read that book or not, again, is makes no difference to me. A read is a read. Sometimes people can be a little bit shocked about how much I reread, not only in the grand scheme of how much I read a year and how many of those books are rereads, but how many books I reread in a singular sense, how many times I reread Pride and Prejudice, and I'll mark that I'm rereading the Fairyland series, and people on Goodreads will be again. So again, fair, I understand. The opposite happens to me, however, where people can say like, this book is a favorite book of all time, but they've only read it once. Like, that does not fit inside of my brain. I have definitely read books that I consider like favorites of the year, or that I know are outstanding, 5 stars, and I can process all of that within a single read. But like the commitment of making it a favorite of all time and you've only read the thing once, like, again, not for me personally. It feels like agreeing to a marriage after only one date. Like, sure, you can fall in love at first sight after only one date. I'm down with that. But like agreeing to the commitment of marriage after only one date, that feels a little bit like it doesn't match up to me. So I want to say all, but I don't know if there are exceptions that I'm not thinking of right now, but most of my favorites of all time are books that I've read more than once. From a personality standpoint, I reread a lot because your girl has anxiety. A lot of what I attribute to mood reading when I'm talking about rereading does come from this place of anxiety, and so it can be external if I'm dealing with a lot of anxiety, like that has nothing to do with the book itself. It can affect how I'm reading and what I can read at the time, but a lot of it comes from the book itself. Like, I am an emotions first sort of reader, and so a lot of times the things that are happening in the book, the frictions, the cliffhangers, the showdowns, or whatever is happening, like, can give me a lot of anxiety, a lot of embarrassment, a lot of emotions in general. So I have to manage that when it isn't good for my brain, when it's something that I can't handle at that moment. Like, I put books aside a lot for this reason, but when I reread, a lot of those things kind of go away because I know the beats of the story. I know the points of contention. I know how they are resolved, which is amazing for me. Like, it's why spoilers also help me. If I know where I'm going, I find that I can better manage that. And not only that, but it brings me a lot of comfort to reread things. It can calm my anxiety down. It's a big de-stressor for me. I find it very similar to how people rewatch their favorite movies or rewatch favorite TV shows, or even consume comfort food. You consume something over and over again because enjoying something familiar brings comfort. And that is the same with rereading, probably with more time commitment. But again, it's a commitment that is worthwhile to me, so I don't necessarily think about it in those terms. Part of the reason that some of my favorite books of all time are books that I've reread plenty is because I feel like books that stand up to rereading have a lot to say for themselves in terms of quality once you've taken out sort of the element of surprise, or to continue my analogy, those first date feelings, the getting to know you feelings. If once you know a book and you can still go in there and enjoy it and find more to enjoy and learn new things and all of that, I feel like that speaks so much and so highly of a book. Over on the other side of like deciding to reread, I feel like rereading makes me a better reader. I feel like it makes me a more critical reader. I feel like rereading teaches me a lot. When our eyes are unfocused from certain elements, like trying to figure out what the plot is going to do next, I feel like we can hone in on other elements of the story. I feel like repetition teaches us things. I feel like just dedicating more time means more time to notice things. Another thing that people frequently ask me is how I learn to read critically, or what are some of the ways that I read critically, and rereading is definitely part of that. I don't think we talk enough about or feel like comfortable enough discussing in this community reading books that we don't understand. And I think that, that is something that we should be all okay with admitting, is when we come across a work or portions of a work that we don't fully understand. It happens to me all the time. I mean, with regularity, that there are things in a book that I don't fully comprehend, even down to like words I don't know, or things that I have to go back and reread in order to make sure that I followed it correctly. And that's such a natural thing for us to do, is like go through something and like, wait, I didn't entirely get that, and go back and reread that portion. So on a larger scale, I feel like rereading work really teaches us how to understand that work. Back on the personality side, I feel like I grew up reading in a kind of way that was like bound to make me a rereader. I've mentioned before that I grew up going to the library with my father and my sisters as a sort of fun and free activity, so we would be checking out books all of the time. But for myself, I never had a collection of books until I was an adult. Well, I did. I had a small collection of books, but they were all found books. So books that were gifted to me, books that mysteriously ended up in our possession that may or may not have been marked with like our school's library stamp at the front of it, things of that nature. Really a hodgepodge, just weird mix of books that ended up in my very small collection. And these were the books that I often read over and over and over again. My dad couldn't keep up with the library trips for as much as I was reading, so my only recourse was to take this 5, 6, 7 books that I happened to own and just cycle my way through it. I think that is something that just prevails in my personality and my reading taste, is sort of that want to spend a lot of time with the books that I enjoy. I wanted to make this purposefully chatty, but now I feel like it was all over the place. So, in recap, I really love rereading books. I get so much joy and comfort out of rereading books. It is very much like coming home to me. It can be a source of comfort when I am stressed or I'm having a lot of anxiety. Sort of melting into not only a story, but a story that I know well can really help me manage that. There is a lot of joy to be found in entering an experience that is sort of guaranteed to give you those good feelings, to give you that hit of serotonin. There is no guesswork there. It is something you will love. I grew up rereading books because I grew up reading the same books over and over again by necessity. My favorite books of all time are books that kind of hold up to being reread, are books that I continue to get joy out of and find new things to experience when I reread them. And I purposefully prioritize rereading because I think that it helps me become a more critical reader. I think it helps me understand books more. It adds another layer of understanding onto me when I come back to a book. Like, I've got that first one under my belt and I'm bringing all of that prior knowledge in, so the repeated experience can really help deepen my understanding of a work, and not only of that singular work, but about like fiction in general and all of the pieces that make up fiction. I hope that gushing about rereading has inspired you to include a little bit more rereading in your own reading. Go reread a book. Go reread a book that you always meant to get around to, or an old favorite that you would like to see if it holds up against the test of time. If the person that you are today still loves that work. If there are any questions that you have about rereading that I didn't address in this video, feel free to ask them down in the comments. I would love to chat with you guys about this. And if you are a rereader, share with me like the number one book that you reread for comfort. Mine is, of course, Pride and Prejudice. I used to read it at least once a year, and now I'm up to rereading it multiple times of years. Times are tough. It is what it is. If you're not a rereader, let's chat about one of those books, a book that you have been meaning to get back around to. And then let me encourage you some more in the comments to go reread a book. That's it for me today. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys soon. I promise I am like not fishing for compliments here, but I just wanted you to know that I've literally never worn black lipstick, and I did this for the first time. I'm still not sure how I feel about it, but I'm putting it up on the internet. Feeling bold today. What else did I want to say? Okay, I don't have time to reread. I have anxiety, personality, the familiar. Why can I not say that word? Familiarity. I don't know why I couldn't say that word.